then when he enters, then we have quorum, and then,
Yeah.
yeah,
So let's come.
microphone.
Thank you. So calling to order Silicon Valley Clean Energy Finance and Administrative Committee meeting of August 19th to order at 10:09 a.m. We'll have the roll call later, but since we don't have the quorum, let's take up the item number 4, which is Energy Risk Management Controls and Oversight. It's an informational item only. Is there a staff presentation?
There is, Chair. That's mine to give. Scott Rigglesworth, Director of Risk Management Analytics, and we'll jump right in when the slides are up. All right, so as noted, this is an informational item. We want to take a moment to provide a lot of transparency and make the update on the status of our risk controls and oversight as an organization. This will also support one of the items on the agenda regarding energy risk management policy revision. So if we jump to the next slide. As noted, it's an informational item to discuss internal controls, oversight, and processes that we have related, most focused on transactions, and those transactions being ones that are executed under the authority delegated to the CEO to manage energy risk. Next slide. Okay, so a little bit of an upfront disclaimer. This presentation is prepared both in light of current policy and standards and procedures we have in place, but it also contemplates the revisions to policy that we're recommending to the board, as well as standard revisions we'd be making. And then finally, it does take into account the procedures that we have that are operational, that don't go before the boards or committee, that are about managing the business and making sure staff have proper instructions and guidance on execution. So next slide. Okay, so I want to just touch on what an energy risk management policy is. What does it govern, and what does the board enable through it? I'm going to jump to the second bullet, because although the non-bold bullets kind of support the top one, but the policy is not something that is uncommon to a non-government entity. So it's not something that we have just because we're a government entity. It's actually something very common in the energy industry and power markets. So this is because we're a power entity, we follow suit, and we have an energy risk management policy. It's a great form of governance, and it's used by all types of entities. It defines how an organization is going to identify, measure, manage, control, and report on financial and operational risks, and kind of the status of a portfolio to its stakeholders. For the board, it's the board's conveyance of what we'll call the guardrails within which staff is allowed to execute for power procurement and for its compliance activities. And I think it's important to note that it balances the need for having oversight and governance to align staff to the board's risk tolerances and policies, with the need to facilitate a nimble organization in a power market that can act in the best interest of stakeholders in a timely fashion. So there's a balance there, and the policy aims to strike the proper balance between that governance and oversight, along with the guardrails for execution of the business. Next slide. So in a picture, what does this look like? I'm a visual person, so you have to forgive me. If you're not the visual person, the words helped you in the last slide. And this is my way of helping to help the visual learner understand it. So on the left is the board. The board does two things here. They either retain certain approvals for very large transactions. For example, only the board can approve a 15-year purchase power agreement. That is not a delegated authority that the board gives the staff. But the board does deliver to the staff effectively the energy risk management policy, and within that, it delegates authority to the CEO and makes clear what the CEO could delegate to what we call the front office or to other staff. So if we go to the right, that policy then gives the CEO the ability to approve what I'll just call important transactions, maybe not a 15-year PPA, but one that needs to be executed in a timely fashion and could go out as far as 5 years. Likewise, the CEO can delegate what I'll call routine transactions that are effectively pre-approved in essence through a procurement plan that the CEO signs off on. And so you could have staff executing with external counterparties on that cascading delegation of authority, albeit lesser than the authority that the CEO has and lesser than the authority the board retains. It doesn't stop there in the ERMP. It goes also to checks and balances. And so as in any entity that has a transaction framework like this for conducting business, the middle office, which is my role, in essence, as the risk manager, has a responsibility through the ERMP to monitor that we're staying within the guardrails that the board has delegated, we're staying within the delegation of authority, there's proper reporting and transparency in compliance with the policy. My role independently reports to the CFO. Likewise, there's a back office that is responsible for settling and paying invoices and that sort of thing, independent of the front office, that basically has a reporting responsibility to the CFO through accounting and payables and so forth. And then the last point here is both the front office and the middle office, and at times the back office, report independently to the board or to a committee on the status of things, so that there's not a single point of, I'll say, a single clearinghouse as to the state of the portfolio or the risk of the organization. So it's a very robust and appropriate mechanism to achieve that governance and oversight with the ability to conduct business. Next slide. Specifically want to call out the delegated authority. So
No.
Yeah, here's your question.
Yeah, there's a question.
I'm not sure if you want us to hold our questions to the end, but since we don't have a full finance committee, I thought maybe we could be interactive with your.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you go back one slide, please? Okay. First of all, I really like the graphics because I'm a graphics person, so I get it. But when I'm looking at this, I know that we spend, and you're involved quite a bit in the stress testing. And
Yes.
I think that, and forgive me, Amrit, the stress testing is where we're coming up with some of those parameters, correct?
Yes, Brian, you're correct. Stress testing is an important part of the middle office controls. It's part of our risk management, monitoring, and reporting. It's related to that aspect of middle office.
So, Scott, I'm just wondering if you just want to, on this diagram, just kind of have that in there, the stress test periodically, because
that's a good point. I would throw all that into the independent reporting, and maybe your question will be satisfied on a future slide where it gets a little more granular.
Best questions are the ones that you have a slide for.
There we go. All right.
Chair, I had one additional comment on this. It took me a little while, and you described it verbally, and then I didn't see it until I came back to the slide. But that reverse arrow of the independent reporting and the reporting, I think, is very important. And there's just been some other civil grand jury comments that have been made about this with other entities, very significant other entities. So I would I would bold that, and maybe, it just took me a little while, you described it, but it's a very important feedback, and I really like it, so make it red or something, so.
All right, we'll do that. Duly noted. Appreciate it.
Scott, I have a question on this slide now that we are on this slide.
Sure.
I like the front office microeconomic supply demand diagram. So, but more importantly, how does the middle office know about the transactions, whether it's by front office or CEO
question.
transactions?
If I may put you off to that same
Okay,
future
that's
slide.
fine. Okay,
Laura
thank
had a
you.
question.
The-
Beautiful. Great question. Great question. All right, moving forward. So we wanted to call out specifically delegated authority. The tables to the right are actually screenshots from the energy risk management policy. Public can see it on our website. And this is a reminder for you on what that looks like. I'm not going to go through it in nuanced detail, but you'll notice that it calls out the products that we can transact, the term limit over, the horizon in which we can transact, the maturity, how long until it ends, volume limits in terms of the amount that could be transacted, counterparty limits, so who can we transact with, and then who is allowed to execute. So you can see most of those are delegated to the CEO. The board retains transactions that are over 60 months. And you'll see here on the left on the bullets, effectively a summary. So transactions greater than 5 years have to be approved by the board. The wholesale market is volatile, and the timing and execution is a short window. So that's why you delegate to the CEO to be sure that we don't miss an opportunity or a need due to kind of the cadence of board meetings. It's worth noting that even though a shorter term transaction could be entered into, the board has to approve what are called, in this case, a master power and purchase sale agreement. So there's an overarching, what's called an enabling agreement. The board approves those before any sort of transaction is conducted underneath them. So there is still a way that in which the board retains an approval in terms of the terms and conditions with which we agree to enter into deals with the counterparty. That process establishes the counterparties that are approved, that the staff has the flexibility to conduct business with. Resource adequacy transactions, it's worth noting, can be with any counterparty. It's a fairly illiquid market, so finding counterparties with whom we can transact is often opportunistic to people's needs in the market. And then the last is just the point that the board approves the types of transactions and volume limits. So we can't go as staff out and do an inordinate amount of volume, nor could we go and transact pork bellies or corn just because we calculated that it's correlated to our business or something. We actually have to have the product approved by the board. All right, next slide. We've used the term front, middle, and back office. I probably should have bumped this up as a precursor, but just to make sure everybody's on the same page of what those terms mean. The front office is the market facing. I won't go through all the bullets, but basically you're dealing with an external counterparty, you're agreeing to terms and negotiating and entering into the contract or the agreement with them. The middle office, my role is doing checks and balances. We're doing a lot of modeling. Some of our activities are in support of the whole business. Others are as a check and balance to confirm that independently things tie out and make sense. Then the last is the back office. The back office is a settlements and accounting function, effectively making sure that everything gets paid and received properly and remitted for compliance or otherwise. Next slide. Yes.
Terry identified reporting as a key item. And it's under middle office here, and then compliance reporting is back office, but I'm just wondering if you want to bump that up higher in the list, just because.
Yeah, and that's fair. And there are some things the front office reports directly, so it's probably worth noting that they report their transactions and so forth. So that's a good point. Or we can bold it or something, but good recommendation.
Yeah, thank you, Brian, for bringing that up. This feeds back to the stakeholder impact. Not sure if we want to bring that to a general general discussion, but we've talked before about the stakeholder impact, specifically around and forgive me if I don't have the exact descriptions of it, but it's the reserves and the projection of the reserves over time. To me, that's a stakeholder impact. And right now, it just is churning in my mind of a concern around that. So being able to have that as an aspect of reporting, particularly when the trend is in that direction. So I'll keep bringing it up because I'm just trying to understand it more as well myself. But I think that's a key part of the reporting. Thank you.
That's a fair point, sir. All right, let's move to the next slide. So one thing we wanted to highlight for you, because you might not see the day in and day out or my calendar and my meetings or all of our meetings on a routine sequence. But kind of as we execute to manage risk controls, and this gets to some of the questions from earlier, there are several staff meetings and then other meetings in which the board takes part where a lot of the topics around transactions, portfolio risk are discussed, contemplated, strategized, executed, and shared with stakeholders. So won't go through all of these ad nauseum, but down the left side are various meetings that happen at least monthly, if not more frequently. And then across the top are roles within the organization, including the board. So the front, middle, and back office is mentioned. Our PPL is our regulatory and legislative team. Customer success is Justin Zagunis and his team. Mike as our general counsel, Monica as our CEO, and then obviously the board in capacity of committees and so forth. So we have meetings on down that are focused on, hey, what's happening right now? What do we need to do? Where do we need to execute? That move into what's that middle meeting there, the Internal Risk Oversight Committee, which is staff, where we all talk about the condition of our risk in the portfolio. And then a lot of what's discussed in that meeting winds up on the agenda with the advising committee of risk oversight. And then further down, as things escalate like this, or the ERMP revisions that we're proposing, it goes to finance committee, executive committee, and board meetings. So there's a lot of rigor behind what's happening day in and day out. And there's a lot of transparency that we strive to deliver as related to risk controls. We don't simply say, hey, we're watching it. We try to carry it on through you. And the stress testing would be a great example of that as we bring that to you each year.
Another question, and maybe I missed it at the beginning. Is this presentation going to go to the board, or is it just for this committee?
I will defer to Monica and Amrit on that question.
This is informational for the committee. The energy risk management policy, that's an action item. This will help you understand the changes Scott is going to walk through. That will go to the board for approval.
Okay, so the board won't see these slides.
That was not, yeah.
Okay. I'm just, as I'm looking at this, and Scott, as you are a visual person, I see in the top left the board approved policy, and then at the right, as the arrows, as the chevrons move to the right, it kind of gets more granular until you get to the back to the board with the Risk Oversight Committee, the Finance Committee, and the Executive Committee. And in the table down below, it gets pretty granular at the top left, or sorry, at the top, and then it kind of goes to the highest level, which is the board. So it's almost like if you moved the ones on the rows on the columns on the bottom where it's board members, CEO, if it starts at the left, and then if it starts at the top with board meetings and you kind of reverse that, then it would be more intuitive to me.
That's fair. Good observation. Appreciate that feedback. I'm sure this stuff will come up again for use in other places, so we'll make that change.
Can I just add that, so the reason that we're bringing this is just to give you a flavor of the types of controls and reporting and oversight that we do on an element of our operations and managing risk, and that's managing the portfolio risk. Our intent was just to bring this to you for information. If the chair or the committee thinks it makes sense for us to take to the board, we can certainly do it, but we consider this to be kind of more operational.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think this is very important, but I think the board should rely on the finance and administrative committee to get into this level of detail and to be really understanding it. So I don't necessarily think it should go to the board, but you know, if they ask a question, it's like, okay, we've done it, we've gone through it in detail. And I think, Terry, you mentioned the civil grand jury, and I think we need to make sure that everything we're doing is you know, thought through thoroughly, and in terms of risks, like we're on it.
My feedback would be, yeah, board should have access to this slide. It's a very informative slide. I think whether it's a part of the packet or something like that for their reference, if they choose to, they can read this, right? So,
Yeah, we can include it in the package when we submit the policy for approval, right, Monica?
Good idea.
And I assume the audit committee would use this as, be presented to this as well as kind of a guideline for them as far as part of the audit.
That's a good suggestion. We could take it to the audit committee. And actually, we will be scheduling a meeting for next month for the audit committee. So, yeah.
All right. The next slide's another visual, and it tells the story in a more well, less wordy fashion, let's say. But imagine it's a pyramid. The ERM policy at the bottom is the foundation. Off of that, we establish the internal standards that give guidance to staff. One of those standards is that the staff shouldn't just run off and do transactions. There should be a needs assessment, a procurement plan that they put together and review with Monica for her sign off. That the staff also create, know, share risk reporting in analytics. And a lot of off to the right there, the tools, we have tools internally. We use a simulation model called PowerSim. We have the IAE, the internal analytic engine that our staff, Alex Krause and our team mans. And then we have our reporting platform that we're building out and growing, which we affectionately call Radar. So those tools help facilitate those two middle tiers of the pyramid. And then once everything is planned out and there's visibility and transparency to the condition of things, then the front office does those steps of executing a trade, the middle office confirming that trade, the back office settling that trade. And as I'm going to describe on the next slide, those things get managed and handled through the Adapt2 deal capture system that we have, another piece of software. And then the scheduling coordinator and our accountancy, those all have steps in the process, checks and balances built in, and a lot of clarity and intentionality behind them. The next slide is actually...
If you could just, I think, pause for a moment. And do you want to,
Yeah,
Go back.
I want to acknowledge committee member
Chuck Page?
At 10:34.
Sorry.
It's,
You want to do a roll call?
we will finish this,
Okay.
that way, yeah.
All right.
Scott.
Just bring Chuck up to speed, or did
No,
did
I
you,
told-
you already,
yeah,
okay,
already
okay.
told it. Go ahead, Scott.
Sure. So maybe one more click, Andrea. I don't see the arrows. Oh, maybe the arrows disappeared. You can go back. There's supposed to be arrows that are on the slide. I'm not sure what happened to them. But they snake around. So we're going to go across the top, down a row back, and then down across the bottom. And this is to help you understand an example transaction. And the point of all of this, in terms of you understanding the risk controls, is to realize that a transaction is as much about the preparation and the post-transaction activities as it is about just clicking a button or sending an email or having a phone call with a counterparty. So there's some abbreviations for you to know. The NA and PP is that needs assessment and procurement plan, and then the FOMOBO or our front, middle, back office. Okay. So the board delegates authority to the CEO, which we've discussed, and then the CEO is going to approve our standards document. And that standards document is going to kind of give staff operational ground rules for conducting their jobs, in essence. One of the things that comes out of the standards is a need for us to continuously model the middle office, model and report our positions and risk. If we don't do that frequently enough, things in the market can move and we can have a false sense of security, say on a stale report. So there's an importance there that everybody is conducting that step and looking at it. Off of that, in the positions, the front office is going to develop that needs assessment and procurement plan. It's their strategy and execution or proposed execution on how they're going to manage the positions and mitigate risks. The front office reviews that with the IROC and the ROC. And ultimately, after any advice that those groups would have on any revisions or suggestions, the CEO is going to approve that plan with signature, effectively putting it into place for the staff to execute against. Moving down directly to actually coming back across, so we're going to go back to the left. The front office, so they're going to issue a solicitation. So they don't just call their buddy up and say, hey, I got permission to buy something from you. There's a process by which they say, all enabled counterparties, here is something that we're looking to buy. And word gets put out and their responses are due at a certain time. Those responses come in at the same time. The counterparties are asked to hold their offers open with enough time for us to deliberate, but a very short window to execute before the market moves again. And the front office doesn't just make the decision on their own. They meet with the middle office. We review the responses, the rationale of selecting a counterparty for the transaction. And we actually quickly confirm their credit rating and our available credit with them before they enter into the transaction, just to make sure we have all our bases covered. Then someone who's approved, so an approved trader, we have a process to approve certain people to trade on SVC's behalf, not just any staff member. That approved trader agrees to terms with the counterparty, and the counterparty sends a document called the transaction confirmation. They send it to us, and our front office director, in this case, Chris Van Vactor, is going to sign that, assuming he has the delegated authority in this transaction. And that confirmation is then going to work its way through a system. The trader is going to enter that into the deal capture system, the system of record about the transactions. And not that we have rogue traders, but lest we have a rogue trader trying to hide something, or we have a fat finger when typing in the details of the transaction innocently made, the middle office staff independently takes that transaction and compares it, the confirmation against the entry by the front office. I would note that the front office is unable to edit. Once they approve and push the transaction to the middle office, the front office can't go back in and edit it anymore. So there's the system provides us a rigorous control on permissions and in preventing mistakes or anything nefarious from ever happening. If the transaction matches, then it continues the process. If it doesn't, the middle office raises the red flag and we work through what the problem is. After the middle office, the back office also signs off on it because they need to be aware of the transaction for settlement, make sure all the requisite details are available for them to do their jobs. And then we capture that transaction, the middle office, in our modeling systems to make sure that we're reflecting the portfolio's current state, given the addition of any new positions. We report all of that to the board and the ROC, as we've mentioned before. The transactions, then what happens in those purple boxes is two steps. In this case, this is thought to be an energy transaction. The revenues get scheduled into CAISO off of that transaction, and because it's a position in the market and it gets paid the market price. The counterparty separately sends us an invoice after the end of the month for all the volume at the price we agreed upon. Both of those steps, the back office is checking to validate that that transaction is being properly recognized per the terms and conditions of that contract and making sure that it's all good to be paid and received or paid. The teal box, the front office, the back office, accounting, and finance all sign off on that transaction before it's approved for release. And that is the very last step. The finance staff schedules, these are usually paid by wire because they're large dollar amounts. The front office, I'm sorry, not the front office, the finance staff schedules the wire. But before that can actually go out, Amrit or his delegate is checking it and then approving it with the bank. So very rigorous process from start to finish before anybody receives any money, making sure that the deal was properly delivered and so forth. So a lot there, but in part to help you understand that there's intentionality and a lot of robust control around what we're doing day in and day out. And then the last slide is just.
Go
Oh yeah, sorry, I should pause. I apologize. Yeah.
Couple of questions. First of all, how frequent are these transactions? And maybe I missed that. Like how many, how frequently does this process occur?
So it depends on the product. I would say generally, and Monica can correct me if I'm wrong, but the solicitations and the procurement under the procurement plan for, say, an energy process like I've described here is probably 2 to 3 times a year as the team looks to fill position across the year. If it's a product like resource adequacy or RPS, maybe some short-term rec acquisition to close a compliance position, those are going to be more needs based on realizing there's a position to fill or open, or opportunistically. RA, for example, we might have a need, but we might not be able to find a counterparty at a drop of a hat. And it might be that somebody communicates out that they're looking to sell some and we need to buy some, and then that's the reason. So that might be a little more frequently than 2 to 3 times a year, but still goes through a similar process to validate all of the transaction steps.
So I'm looking at that red box that's dead center.
Yeah.
Counterparty sends a transaction confirmation to SVCE.
Yes.
How many times does that happen? That's, I guess, I see that as a volume indicator.
Well, in any one transaction or any one solicitation, like we've described here, we might pick 2 or 3 counterparties, depending on what their offers are for their different months and the prices. So maybe a dozen confirmations a year for transactions for filling ISTs, which would be the energy hedges, the short-term energy hedges. And then, you know, maybe there's
Scott, I can
yeah,
add
go ahead.
like as Scott mentioned, it's really need dependent.
Yeah.
When we first formed, we were doing a lot of this because we didn't have a real portfolio of long-term resources. Now that we have 60 to 70% of our needs being met through long-term resources, there's less of a need for this type of transactions, the frequency. But regardless, the process and the controls, whether we do 2 transactions or 100 transactions, are still the same. We still need to have all that oversight. In the monthly CEO report that I send to the board every month, at the very end of that report, there's a list of all the transactions that we executed through this delegated authority. So you can see that on a monthly basis, we usually list maybe 3 to 5 transactions that we do. The greatest number of transactions, or probably lowest dollar amount, occurs on procuring resource adequacy, which is a compliance requirement that we have as a load serving entity.
Okay, so and my next question was going to be, how liquid is this market and what is the form of the market? And what I'm hearing is it's basically email based, for lack of a better term. It's not like it's a market where you go in and you bid and there's like 10 transactions a day sort of thing.
Since I have the mic on, I'll answer. Well, it depends on the product, like the long-term solicitation. So we're inviting counterparties, developers for new build. So that's that process is a bilateral market. Then there's a spot market where transactions, and that's the settlement part. And another point I wanted to come to. But regarding the market, like the short-term products, then when we didn't have a portfolio built up, that's fairly liquid. So there's an active market, and we can buy through the CAISO IST markets, which is very transparent. So depending on the nature of the product. Now, the long-term solicitations, PPAs that we do, that is what we'd call a bilateral market. So we put out RFP and solicit and that process. The other thing I wanted to add is that we focused on the red box with the new transactions. The back end of this, the settlement invoice payment processing, is a continuous daily function. Because remember, all the PPAs that are coming online, all the transactions we have in the portfolio, it's an ongoing settling with the CAISO is a daily activity, weekly at least activity, and scheduling and coordinating with the CAISO is obviously a daily activity. And so all these back-end transactions, invoice payment processing goes on. Daily meaning some counterparties we settle a month after the close of the month, but depending on when not all counterparties have the same end date, so they go out.
There's a tail to them.
Yeah. So I would do wires maybe 3 times a week. I'll do one tomorrow, for example. I did one, I think, a day, Monday. Yeah.
And then where does Mar Accountancy fit into these boxes?
So all the invoices that come in comes into a central invoice box, processed by finance. It goes into a bill.
Show me the box so that
it's in the very last, the green box and the bottom.
FO, front office reports, transactions.
FOBO, accounting and finance, mid-office validate invoice payment. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So we have a system, bill.com, so all invoices get uploaded. It goes into that. Then we prepare the monthly treasury reports that we send to the board. All of that is part of that month close, and then year close. And then we have back office and finance staff working with accounting, with Mahar's team, to validate all these transactions and recording and entry into the journals.
Where my question is going is, I know that Mar Accountancy does virtually all the accounting for all the CCAs in the state of California except 2. And I'm just wondering how much of this process is common to the other CCAs, and that would be the only box that would be the only part of the process that would be similar, is what happens in that teal box.
The teal box that Maher does is probably similar to what he does for others. Now, what happens on the CCA side may be very different.
I would think it's extremely different, and I think this is one of the most sophisticated ones out there by the grand jury report.
Yeah, and he wouldn't, if I understand where your question's going, he would not have knowledge of the transactions before the invoices are coming in to be paid. So there's not a risk of cross-contamination, if you will, on.
I'm
deals.
not worried. I'm not concerned about that. I think we've got a very robust process here with lots of checks and balances at internal controls. And, there's only one component that touches the transaction reporting, which is what Mara County does. They're not involved in any of this other bit. And another kind of question, my question is, has this evolved? Because you were describing it was very, there were different needs before, and this is where we've got to now. So
Yeah, I think that this process, the boxes, essentially represents what we've been doing from day one. We've added more people, we've added more sophistication to the boxes, we've added more systems to the boxes, but the boxes have existed since day one. And so just to kind of take a step back on why we buy anything for that matter, when SBCE was formed and your communities created us, they created us as what's called a load serving entity. And that load serving entity has obligations that come with it, including meeting clean goals that the state sets or the board sets, meeting compliance obligations for resource adequacy or for reliability products, and being able to manage the risk that is inherent in being a load serving entity that has to operate in a very volatile energy market. And that's why we do these ISTs or interscheduled trades. They're hedging products. So all of this is to meet those obligations that we took on when we established SBCE as a load serving entity. So this is all risk management stuff. But yeah, all of this stuff has existed from day one. It exists as a standard practice for any entity, whether it's a government or a PG&E, to do transactions in a market like this and manage risk. It's just we've gotten better at defining how we do them in a more controlled way.
my observation is that even though the steps may have been the same, the segregation of duties has increased because we've got more staff.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
from an internal control perspective, that
Yeah.
segregation of duties.
And that was intentional.
Yeah.
Like we, on day one, we couldn't have a staff like this. We had to create that. So.
Thank you.
Scott, I love your visuals. Just one suggestion on this is obviously the color coding has some pattern to it. Maybe you just be able to show on the slide what the color coding is.
Fair point. Yeah, it was triggering the who's responsible. So green's front office and so forth, the orange back middle office. So, but I
That's
can
what I
flag that.
figured. Then you can just put the color coding in those. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's a fair point. Very good. Very
Thanks,
good. And I'll
Terry.
find my arrows too.
Yeah, my observation was similar to that, and then maybe in the box where you have the legends, maybe use the same color, or that's one suggestion. Anyway.
Yep.
Thank
Very
you.
good. Appreciate that feedback. All right, we have one last slide. It's just a
Go
quick
ahead.
I have
overview.
one more question, Scott, before we go, and I apologize for my tardiness. I knew today was going to be tough, but not this tough. And I apologize if I missed this, but can you please tell me what positions make up the front office, the middle office, and the back office? I mean, I know it's
Sure.
individuals, but what are their positions is probably a better way to describe it.
Sure. Well, I'll name people and positions. So the front office is Chris Van Vactor, who's our director of resource planning, or not resource planning, I'm sorry, power procurement. And his department is responsible for that.
Go to your slide.
Slide 5.
Oh, okay.
Slide 5 might.
Yeah, and that'll show the duties. Maybe the slide with the front, middle, and back office, Andrea, would be good. One more. There you go, that one.
Thanks.
So
I think
Chris-
I've seen it somewhere, but
Chris is the front office, and his staff execute that that first column. I am the middle office in my staff, so director of risk management. So we're doing analytics and checks and balances, that sort of thing. And then Willie Wong is our manager for the back office. that back office as kind of a matrix reporting in the context of the front office, or what we call pro procurement, because they're responsible to do the execution around settlements and scheduling and that sort of thing. And then also had dual reporting to the CFO through accounting, through transaction reporting and so forth. Have a duty to have a segregation of duty there. So those would be the roles. He's the director of the back office, or the manager of the back office.
Thank you very much.
The last slide is just kind of the next step. So I won't belabor this on the sake of time, but we have an ongoing process that we've been seeking to make sure we don't have any gaps in procedures, and that all our procedures are up to date with what's actually the practice today. So there's a process within our group, and then org-wide through Nick in the business continuity process, to document kind of routine procedures so that it's clear and on paper. We have the radar project that's well into momentum, and we'll have an official go live when all the data pipelines are plugged in for automation. But that's our reporting platform, single source of truth, get all the data in a single place instead of bespoke spreadsheets in people's files and so forth. And then the last thing is policy and standards. The policy item is going to come to you here in this meeting, and then standards would be a follow-on after that to make sure that the standards are aligned to any policy revisions. So that's our goal for next steps in continuous improvement. So with that, I'll close and let you take it from there.
Thank you, Scott.
Very much appreciated, Scott, the excellent review of the risk management. So
Thank you, Scott. We'll move on to the regular meeting agenda. Can we have roll call, please?
Yes, thank you. Committee Chair Srinivasan,
Present?
Committee Chair Makachuk, Vice Chair Makachuk.
Present.
Thank you. Director Hines,
present.
Director Page.
Present.
I will note that alternate Director Abe Koga and Risto are absent, but we do have a quorum of our committee present.
Okay, thank you. Next is public comment on matter not listed on the agenda. The public may provide comments on any matter not listed on the agenda, provided it's within the subject matter jurisdiction of SVCE. Speakers are customarily limited to 3 minutes. However, committee chair might increase or decrease the time allocated for each speaker based on the number of speakers, length of the agenda, and complexity of the subject matter. Do we have any speakers in person or online?
No speakers, Chair.
Thank you. I close public comments. Bring it back to the next agenda item, consent calendar. Do we have any committee members have any comment on the consent calendar item, which is approval of minutes of May 28th, 2026, Finance and Administrative Committee meeting?
Move to approve the consent calendar.
Oh, before that,
Oh,
I need
sorry. Oh, you gotta do-
the
yeah,
public
sorry,
comment. Do we have any comments just on the comment? Okay, thank you. Now I open for public comment. The public might provide comments on consent calendar item. Is there any members of the public wishing to speak on this, either remote or in person?
No comments.
Thank you. Bring it back to the committee. Need a motion and.
Move to approve.
Second.
Thank you. With that, can we have a roll call vote or voice vote?
A voice vote since we have all present.
Yeah, voice
Aye.
vote.
Aye.
All right.
The
Any
consent.
opposed or any abstain? None, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next is the regular calendar. We have 3 items, and then we are running a little bit late according to my calendar. So the first item is CFO update, and then the next 2 items are action items. So I would like to dedicate more time for the action items. Go ahead, CFO.
Yeah, on the CFO update, just one quick update on the timing of the expectations of future meetings. Last time we met, we had talked about next meeting would be this meeting, and after this, we'd have one in November. We're thinking of having another meeting in October, and that's to bring in our next prepaid transaction. And also one of the agenda items we intended to cover at this meeting, which was the frameworks for developing the fiscal year 27 budget, which we will now delay. We will now move to that October meeting. And we'll send more details on the exact timing of that, which we haven't determined yet, but we expect it to be sometime around October.
Okay, thank you. Any comments from committee members? No. I open for public comment on this update. Is there anybody in person or remote wishing to speak on this item?
No comments, Chair.
Okay, thank you. We'll close this item. Thanks for the update. The next item is recommend the Silicon Valley Clean Energy, recommend the SVC Board of Directors approve the proposed stub operating budget and maintain the current fiscal reserve targets and policy. Is there a staff report?
Yes, Chair, and I will go through the presentation. So this is a special one-time only for this year. We have the stub budget. As you know, we are transitioning, and we talked about it at the last meeting in May. We're transitioning to a new fiscal year starting January 1, 2027, for which we will bring the budget framework discussion, as I just mentioned in the previous agenda item, at the new expected meeting in October. And then we'll review the budget before it goes to the board in November with this committee, and then we'll go to the board in December in time for any rate change approvals we will seek at that time. If you remember from previous processes, this is the time when we have more certainty on what the 2027 rates will look like. Not that we have the final rates, but by that time we have pretty good indication of what the rates will be, which then we can make an informed budget decisions as well as rate changes that we will put into effect in 2027. Okay, so coming to the stub budget, so I wanted to give every budget presentations we talk about are, for the most part, our 5-year financial outlook. And we have spent a lot of time on that and activity also, not just with the committee, but with the board in improving our financial levers playbook. So I just wanted to give a quick update on the 5-year financial outlook and then the stub highlights of the stub budget. So when I go through in detail, you'll see that the outlook somewhat improves from what we had discussed previously with the committee, in that the days cash on hand managed over the 5-year horizon now ending at around 190 days of cash on hand, whereas previously the mid-year budget we were at 142. And again, there's a footnote there. These are not apples to apples comparisons, but for the most part, just giving you broad direction in which our finances are moving. The main reason for that is there are a few movements that are favorable right now in terms of our forecast, and one of them is another drop in carbon-free prices. Since we developed the mid-year budget, carbon-free prices have dropped significantly, and these are GHG-free, not RPS eligible, but those that still qualify as clean energy, like large hydro. Prices for those attributes or those products, resources, have come down in the market following the trend of all the other prices like RPS and energy that have come down. And those have kind of stayed at the lower levels. So that lowers our power procurement cost and helps with our financial outlook. And the other thing that's also improving is there are some favorable movements in our power portfolio positions, and I can get into the details if we want to, if you have any questions other than what we stated in the staff report. And the other thing is, in May, PG&E first puts out a preliminary outlook of 2027 rates. And there are some improvements we're seeing on the PCIA that cascades into future year because of again, we have limited information, and the models we use have limited information in forecasting these rates. So those show some improvement. But now that I've shared the good side, let me caveat that a little bit. When PG&E puts out its projections in May for the next year's rates, By the time we get to the final rates or even the rates that we expect, another update that PG&E will do in October, after the CPUC issues the critical market price benchmarks that are used to compute these rates, PG&E will do another forecast. And that forecast in the past has significantly deviated from the May forecast. So I wouldn't put too much into this forecast right now. And just in a few months, 3 months, we'll have much better outlook of our 5-year financial forecast. If I go to the second green box there, you can look at the biggest impact hit in our 5-year horizon is the 2027 budget. That's the most negative that we're projecting right now. And that is where we will have more information starting from the October when PG&E will start publishing their updated portfolio and following CPUC's market price benchmark updates, which will then cascade into a budget process that we'll bring to the committee in November and to the board in December. Brian, I see you have a question.
Yes. When you do your 28 to 31 outlook, do you do that by quarter or do you just do it for the full year? And where I'm going with that question is if you just take out what would be Q4, which is the stub, right? Which would normally be in the new fiscal year, I would call it a Q4. So we could see that negative 150 against what we think it'll be in the future in that forecast. So you can see the Q4 apples to apples.
Yeah, I'm going to get to that in coming slides. This is just the highlights, and then I'm going to go through the details. So set you up with the highlights.
You can do that.
Right.
That's
Oh,
my
yeah.
question.
It all flows through.
Right.
It 1 year, how the reserves change over time, and that's how we show the days cash on hand.
Maybe we'll wait for the entire presentation before asking questions.
It's
That
okay.
way.
I don't mind.
Yeah.
But we'll keep moving. So the highlights of the stub budget, you can see it's a negative budget. We expect it to be about 27.6 million draw from reserves to balance the budget. There's no new information related to that because this follows what we discussed the budget that was approved for fiscal year 25-26, which is namely where 2026 PCIA and PG&E rates came in. If you remember that discussion, this is a difficult year. And new rates won't go into effect. We don't expect PG&E's new generation rates changes until January. And that, again, we will bring that update in the next budget outlook. Okay. With that, I'll go to the next slide, looking into the details. Little reminder from our previous meeting about the stub budget. Remember, this is a unique budget. It's a 3-month. Some reminders that it's very difficult to do a 3-month budget than a 12-month budget because a lot of our expenses are not really pinpoint to a month, but more to a 12-month. And there's an example there. I won't go through it again. We discussed it last time. Just a quick reminder. Revenues and expenses vary by season. And the last point there is we don't have any 3-month budget to compare to. Normally, when we present budget, we compare it to a previously approved budget. This is a problem we're going to have for 27, which we'll discuss in the October meeting. But we're comparing it with the actuals or so-called unaudited financials right now for the Q4 2025, which I'll go show in an upcoming slide. But remember the discussion we've had before. When we put a budget, especially for non-power, in power supply, we don't put too much contingencies. It's basically how the portfolio is expected to perform with a snapshot of market prices we take when we put the budget together. But for operating expenses, if you remember, we put a lot of contingencies so we don't have to have frequent updates. It doesn't necessarily have a big impact on our finances because it's a much smaller portion, less than 10% or less. And we do account for it in our financial forecast. There's contingencies, which I'll remind again when we get to that page. But just a reminder that this is an unusual comparison for now. Very quickly on the 2026 rates, which again continue into this stub budget, because as I said, the rates are not expected to change until 2027 for PG&E, which is when we will align our rate changes. We're continuing with what the board had approved for the previous budget and the currently approved rate. So we're not changing rates with this stub budget. We're continuing with the 1%, asking the board to approve this budget with the understanding that we're going to continue to provide 1% discount on average to applicable PG&E gen rates. We're going to continue the 12 monthly bill credits and the green prime rate, which will reset following the board approved methodology at the December meeting. Okay. Now we get to the comparison and the budget. And again, 4Q 2025, those are unaudited. The audit is actually going to begin. We're going to have a kickoff meeting next month. And then the current fiscal year ends September 30th, 2026. And the stub budget obviously starts from 10/1/2026 and ends in December 31st, 2026. You can see same as the same story for 2026 continues. The big drop in revenues, that's the main, and the reasons for that, again, I explained in the previous slide, is the drop, increase in the PCIA and a drop in PG&E's generation rates. One new item that you can see there is a transfer to Eco Invest Fund, and I'm going to talk about that in the next slide. But here you have a quick comparison and how we derive at the 27.2 million draw from reserves. So any question on the numbers here? Yes, Chair.
Yeah, why did the operating expense go up? That 3 million?
Yeah. So this relates to the point I was trying to make in the previous slide. It's not really, remember when we put in operating
Yeah.
expense, it's all the contingencies. That's why when we do the physical 5-year forecast, we take 6.5 million out because of this on a 12-month period basis, because of these contingencies. And this is something, as we mentioned in the staff report and mentioned previously, we are tightening. Next evolution of our business process, or now we're calling more radar project, where we're tightening the forecasting of this, so bring it closer to actual expend from a budgeting perspective, as well as look for operational efficiencies that can preserve reserves as well. So that is an effort underway right now. But it's there again, and part of this is also shows like a big reason is that comparing a 12-month budget to a 3-month, part of that is also plays into this comparison.
Under energy revenues, how many kilowatt hours is that? And what I'm looking at is what's the revenue per kilowatt hour difference versus the volume?
So volume really doesn't change much. It's around 4 million megawatt hours, maybe 4.2 with some growth. So that's where our load is. So that it really hasn't changed much from the previous budget to this budget. But it's really the rate forecast because we're comparing 2025. Same story we shared in the last budget, right? 2025 was a big positive year. So was 2024, but the headrooms
right.
came down.
We don't have a load problem. We've got a revenue problem, which is not set by us.
Yes,
Understood.
I'll just go into very quickly back to the previous. If you look at the bar here,
Yeah.
we have the PG&E rate. We try to be 1% below that. For that, we are absorbing the PCIA that our customers pay, and I'll also get into that in the future slide. So that basically the blue box there, that's a weighted average for 2026, not the step budget, the 7.82 cents per kilowatt hour. That blue box, I forget the number, was much orders of magnitude higher for 2025 than it is for 2026. So that's the blue box is the only thing we can do to maintain competitiveness and absorb the PCIA. So when PCIA goes up, PG&E gen rate comes down, we have to shrink that. That shrinks our revenues.
Maybe we can, for the future board meeting, we could put in what the actual rate is per kilowatt hour on average.
Yeah, we actually show all of that in the budget on a weighted average basis when we go through the rate changes, and we'll do that in the 2027 budget. We had done it, story is the same, so I didn't share it here. But margin something, I think it was more like 50% decline in our headroom from last year. The new Eco Invest. So Eco Invest is not new. There's something called non-standard pricing agreement that the board approved. It's a board approved policy that basically, and the intention on this policy is there are certain customers that are large customers that could be at risk, we could be at risk of losing. So the intention behind this policy, and some of this is also was intended around the direct access opening and the related issues there. But the policy is to basically do, following the guidelines of the board approved policy, make special rate offerings to these customers that overall is beneficial for all of our customers by retaining them. The intention is to retain these customers for the benefit of our entire portfolio and all of our customers, instead of otherwise losing them to competitive pressures. So in exchange, one of the products we offer is Eco Invest, which is very much in line with our mission, where we will contribute to a fund or that these customers a customer can access to implement local decarbonization projects in our service territory to reduce carbon emissions. But in order for them to access the fund, they also have to put an equal or matching amount. So we have funds we have some customers on this program and another pending customer once they accrue those funds, they can tap into that fund at any time. There's no customer right now to date has tapped into it yet. So rather than taking this out into the operating budget as it occurs, it's very much following the similar process we do for all our decarbonization program funds. As you saw in the previous slide, we transfer out of the operating budget to a fund, just like we did for building fund, just the program. Remember when I go to the reserves, the blue bar, light blue, dark blue, the earmark funds, biggest portion of that is earmarked for programs. This is programs, but doesn't fall under the general program fund allocation. It goes under Eco Fund. So we're asking the board create an Eco Fund where we can transfer. Initially, for this stub budget, we're transferring $3.5 million. Our expectation is there may be a draw of about $1 million within the Q4 for these activities, again, for local decarbonization programs, which we very much support and in line with our mission. So this would follow, this follows our accounting treatment. It's better governance, better visibility and the use and amount to basically treat it as a portfolio rather than one-off customer taking it out on a forecast basis from each operating budget. So because a customer can accrue, rather than what they accrue, they don't spend it in that year. They can spend it all in any of the years under which they're under a long-term contract. Again, the intention is for offering this is to retain them as a customer over a long-term period. Okay. All right, so something that Scott and Justin did in our financial levers is to show on a cents per kilowatt hour basis. So we brought this into the budget perspective as well. And what the two bars there show, the plus is the cents per kilowatt hour. As the slide says, these are the variables that affect the stub budget in cents per kilowatt hour. So plus means they contribute positively. Or they're sort of like revenues, So 10.2 cents, this is if we take the PG&E rate discounted by 1%, we get that. 0.5 cents there is the return on our reserves. And the 2.6 is the draw from reserves to balance the budget. On the negative side there, the biggest component, the biggest cost of our portfolio is the cost of our power purchases. So that's 8.2 cents. And then the other operating expenses that we talked about is 1.6 cents. And then you can see 3.6 is the PCIA. Now, it's not a budget item. It's not something we budget for, but it has the impact of reducing that 10.2. You take that 10.2 and subtract 3.6. Was that 6.6, something like that? So on average, that's what our revenue comes down for the stub period, right? And in terms of dollars, I want to say, so we are absorbing $34 million in this budget to offset the PCIA impact. And if you look at the draw on reserves, it's $27 million. So that's 7 million. If in other words, if PCIA did not exist, we don't want to get into the arguments of that, but I'm just for illustration purposes, we'd be making 7 million as opposed to a draw on reserves of 27 million. Okay. So I'll give you a preview of the 27 as we are forecasting right now. This is not the budget, which we'll bring later. You can see that we are forecasting to absorb 158 million in PCIA versus a projected draw on reserve of 150 million. If for some reason the PCIA were never there or didn't exist, we'd be making 8 million. We wouldn't be drawing from reserves. Okay. Those are the main points of that. Now coming back to our 5-year outlook. So Brian, maybe to your earlier question here. So all the stub, you can see the stub period there, October to December, that's the stub budget. And then fiscal year 2027, which now follows calendar year all the way out to 2031, shows how, based on current projections, there's, as I said, there's a lot of uncertainty. Remember all the uncertainty we talked about in the stress test, those are all present in this budget. There's uncertainty increases over time, so there's greater uncertainty further out in time. And as we said, this is 5-year outlook under what I probably will relabel this slide called baseline projection, which is where as we've discussed with the board and the committee before, this assumes some additional liquidity where, again, I take out this operating expenses, the contingency we built in on an annual basis right now by 6.5 million. Once we tighten that budgeting process, we will obviously change the 6.5 as well. But for now, we're taking it out. And then we're expecting there, if the 2 bars at the end of 2031 were the same, that would basically mean that all the earmarked funds, primarily funds we have for our DCOP programs, what we project we will spend by end of the 5-year period. We know that that's not a reasonable assumption. So in this budget, we've assumed this reasonably, there'd be still like 20 million in balance. So with those assumptions, that's the projection. You can see better than the mid-year and even the baseline we shared at the stress test in June, but nevertheless below our operating target. And that brings me to the point number 3 there. We went through extensive discussion on the financial levers playbook, which the board approved, which we discussed with the committee in May last meeting, and with the board in June, with the board approved. And that's the arrows to say that as per that playbook, we're not changing anything for 2026 or 2027. We expect to continue under the way we've been operating. But but obviously we closely monitor on a weekly basis, as Scott went through in the informational item, our internal process, measuring, monitoring, and reporting on risks. We'll continue to monitor this, and should the need be, obviously we'll come back to the board and use the playbook as a guideline and make those proposals following the guidelines and what the board approved in the financial levers playbook to bring our reserves to the extent needed towards the operating budget. Towards the operating days cash on hand target, I should say. All right, so what we do with every annual budget, and we're doing it for the stub budget now, we'll do it again for the 2027, and I expect the recommendation will be the same for the next budget for calendar 2027 or fiscal year 2027, which is no changes to the reserve policy. Obviously, changing targets right now is not prudent because we are, as we mentioned in the last committee meeting and the last board meeting, we are sort of living a stressful condition. And also there's no meaningful impact. If you look at our financial forecast, there's no ability to add per the forecast. So we're recommending that we don't change our reserve targets and keep the reserve policy as is. One quick note, we go through operating expenses and there's really not much change. There's some discussion in the staff report. The one major change, one change we are asking is on the staffing, level of staffing. We are asking to increase by 1 more person, and this is to bring on a facilities manager. As you know, we're expecting to bring our building in operation starting next month. And for that, we obviously have a critical need to manage the facility and manage the investment. And there are a lot of day-to-day activities related with that. And that's the ask here, that we increase that headcount by 1, which brings our budgeted full-time headcount to 68. And there's some movements between part-time and consulting basis, and that has to do with it's not that we're changing anything there. The reason it shows 2 part-time is that 1 part-time person that we're bringing on to help with some of our rate analysis and rate implementation process preferred not to be on a W-2, but preferred to be on 1099. So from an accounting and budgeting processing, that would be under professional services budget. So that's what we're noting there, but no change in terms of resources that we're asking for here from that perspective. So that brings me to the conclusion of the forecast. In summary, the outlook has improved, but again, below our target level. So we still are facing financial headwinds. But reminded that we have built reserves anticipating these type of outcomes, for which we are using reserves now, and that we have the financial levels playbook that we will implement as needed to bring our reserves back up. And we will be monitoring that closely. And we will have the biggest uncertainty is the 2027 budget in terms of, if you look at the 5-year forecast, that's where we have the biggest draw on reserves, 150 million, much lesser on average, of like something like less than 20 million for the outer years. And we will have much more certainty in the coming months. In 3 months, we'll bring the budget for 2027, which will have much better outlook for 2027 rates. Okay, with that, I can take any questions before we ask the committee's vote to recommend that the board approve the stub budget.
Any comments from our committee member? Okay, go ahead, if you have a question.
Oh, I always have questions. Can you go back to the forecast, the 5-year? So this is a forecast of days cash on hand, but do we have an actual P&L forecast?
We have reserves associated. We don't necessarily break it into P&L, but we could. It's just an extra exercise, but we have it broken down. Basically the same resolution we have the budget. And I can show you, actually, it's in here in the appendix. Right there.
Okay. In here, where is the benefit of our prepaid?
So
and how much is that? Because I think we've got some prepaids that are maturing. So the rollover is going to be, there's uncertainty. Okay, you're nodding your head, you understand.
Yeah, so prepay is baked into our power supply cost. It's like on a cents per kilowatt hour, and we showed in 2027, it's like 0.5 cent or about $20 million or close to 19 million. We are assuming the rollovers continue repricing. There's one, I believe, that will come up for repricing within this period. And then we also assume we've added one additional prepay. And that's about 4-point-something million contributing a year starting in 2027. As I said, we'll be bringing prepay next Finance Committee meeting, expected to be in October. And we're also internally going through a whole prepay strategy and how to optimize and actually be able to execute more, but not ready yet to speak to right now. But we're working on those details, and that can also improve this outlook.
Okay, maybe offline we can have a discussion of that power supply line.
Absolutely.
Okay. My next question, I'm not sure how to phrase it, but I know that there's legislation that's being considered on the PCIA. And if that transparency starts to come through, what does that do for our budgeting in our understand and our confidence in where the days cash on hand is going to be. Can you just make some general comments about that, please?
I'll make general comments. So in terms of legislation, we don't really know what that transparency is and whether it's going to give the level of transparency that I think we should have in being able to model the PCIA. And I'm not too confident personally that may give us all the information we need. But separate from that, there's also the PCIA proceeding that's going on at the CPUC. There's 3 tracks. Track 1 is done. Track 2, a decision came out. Track 3 is where a lot of these, which we're engaging in right now, is where a lot of these issues will be addressed. And we have made proposals along with data transparency, but also into how we think certain resources should be handled in the PCIA. That can have a significant impact should it transpire, but there's a lot of uncertainty that I can't really take a direction on right now in terms of budgeting and forecasting unless more is revealed. And we are closely monitoring, and it's a big effort on our part because of the significance of that to our finances.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you. Excellent presentation. Just more of a question, the 1% discount, what's the dollar amount, the impact of that 1% discount?
It's less than 4 million. I think it's for the stub period. It's probably, or stub period is much less than like million, maybe less than 800,000 or so. I don't have a precise number, but generally it's around 4 million. Last year, I think it was 4. This year, it's probably more like 3.5 because the rates have come down.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. I can, the slide that you were showing was the decreasing reserves. I'll continue to emphasize that I'm greatly concerned about that. Just the trend is not in the right direction, and it doesn't look to be any resolution to that trend. I don't know if PG&E is they're gonna continue to try and push their rates lower as well. So it looks like there's going to continue to be pressure to address that. One question, given that that optic then of adding staff is of concern to me as well. I know you need a facilities manager for the building, so I'm not saying no facilities manager, absolutely not on that. But it's just the optic of increasing staff is of concern. I don't see that in your recommendation summary here, meaning that from the standpoint of the recommendations that are listed here, I'm good with that. If the staffing decision is included in that, then I have a problem with it. But if it's a separate discussion, separate approval, I'd be, yeah.
The staffing is included in the budget, in the proposed budget. The impact is probably fairly low in terms of the overall finances. I will make some points, and if I forget to address any of them, please remind us again. In terms of the forecast, one thing I want to say, there's a lot of uncertainty. We just talked about PCIA. With the regulation changing, that can change. We don't know. Market prices, as we said, all of a sudden they collapsed, and we've been preparing for them. But there's much more uncertainty, especially when we look 5 years out. And then again, we have very limited information on things like PCIA. So we do the best we can with the information, but there's a lot of uncertainty. That's why they're closely monitoring. And that's why we've engaged with the board for more than a year now on the financial levels discussion, getting ready for this and having the ability to pull on it. And also getting to this stage when we had those good years, recognizing these risks and building adequate reserves. So part of that. On the operating expenses, there is an effort, as I said, part of it is to tighten not just the budgeting aspect of it, but also to look at operational efficiencies. And when we propose any kind of an increase, I absolutely understand the optics of it. Obviously, there's a risk too with the staffing and then protecting assets and investments and running the operation with the diligence that we need. That also has a risk. So there's a balance there. I don't know, Monica, if you want to add anything.
Yeah, certainly agree with everything that Amrit said. The optics is the one that we talk about a lot internally. And so we've kicked off an effort internally when we were looking at the financial levers to see of that operational expense, which is, in the grand scheme of things, not a very big portion, but it's one that there's some part of it that is discretionary and some part of it that we need to just have some expenses to run the agency. And so we're looking at it not just from what we can do to reduce that and make sure that when we bring any proposal to you under this financial lever playbook or at any time that impacts the value proposition that we deliver to our customers, that we are internally saying, are we doing it in the most efficient way? And we're also looking at how we compare to other CCAs or our peers in the area who deliver the same type of services, but sometimes different services as well, to see our, not just do we think we're operating efficiently and well, but how do we compare to others? And so this is something that we 100% hear you. And, the building itself is its own beast and it requires management is what we're learning. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm not questioning the facilities management. It's the optics. So there was a budget line item can you bring it up again on the budget line item that you had about the operating expenses? It looked to be a reduction, operating expenses.
Maybe it was
Maybe
in the 5-year financial forecast, the appendix. I think that's probably what it was.
Yeah, that one. So this is where I'll be, I'll be concerned about that. It looks like the operating expenses are the 370, there's not all of that. Okay, what? Operating margin, 370. But that's the detail that I'm hoping to be able to see a net management, net decrease over time of that number.
Yeah, I think one of the other things that Amrit and his team is working on, and we have an outside support on this too, is figuring out better ways to present this information to you, because when you look at operating expenses, by far the majority of the expenses in power supply.
Yeah.
Which,
I understand.
obviously, but so we will look at items where we can clearly show you what's discretionary, what's non-discretionary, and where that's trending as well.
Very good. That would definitely make me more comfortable. Thank you. And manage the optics.
And this, we spend a lot of effort in modeling the power supply portfolio with the sophistication, rigor, stochastic modeling for risk and everything. In terms of in the budget, we use the market data. That moves the needle on those days in the big picture of our financials. On this operating budget, we don't have, and it is by design coming later in the stage of what we initially worked through the board with the business process optimization, and we're getting to that phase now, what Scott called radar. I'm getting to the aspect of it now. It's the prioritizing, and same with the budget presentation. If you look at the assumptions we've made in terms of these other expenses, with the exception of staff medical cost, where we know 5% escalation is not good, it's more like 10% or everything else has just grown 5%. We just don't have the staffing, the timeline to spend that much on this 10% aspect of the budget to fine tune it. It's not going to change the big picture of our finances. It's where the market prices are. It's where our headroom is. And that's where our effort has been.
And I think I mentioned this before, being able to compare this to other organizations would I think be quite beneficial as well.
Thank you. Yeah, just a quick one. Thank you very much for the presentation. And before I got on this board, I was always like, where the hell did they get all that money in reserves for? And it's like, we the people are paying that, aren't we? And I thank you for the time that I've spent here. I now understand it a great deal more, and it makes sense. I know that we've changed that number of what we're taking for reserves over the course of the year. I was wondering if you could tell me where this is compared to the last couple, I mean, and then what it is for the next fiscal year, which is also going to be the calendar year.
For the most part, the last few years,
Yeah.
have been in a good, fortunate
Really
position of
good.
adding to reserves because
Yep.
prices, skyrocketed, especially RPS. Trading
Yes.
orders of magnitude higher than what they are, reaching $75, $80.
Right.
And now it's like less than $10 or so in some cases. Right. And those were the years when we said what goes up will come down. We don't know when, but reasonable to assume that was a stress testing. So for the most part, with the exception of maybe 2021, when we had a negative year, it was very small, like 1 million or so. This is by far the biggest we're seeing since our operation.
And over the
Since
course of
at
the
least I've
year,
been
we
here.
projected different withdrawals from reserves. Where are we now compared to the last, earlier this year, we said we're going to take X amount.
Oh, I see. Sorry.
Oh,
I
yeah, thank
misunderstood.
you.
Yeah. So as Scott went through our current process, every week we update. So latest is at mid-year, we said we were going to be withdrawing 12.5 million from reserves. Now we're actually flipped around, 11 million. But this doesn't mean good news always. But our forecast of draw for 2027 has also gone up from 130 million to 150 million, almost equal. And that's a reason for them. That's why we always look at 2 years out, never look at a budget 1 year. If you remember the last discussion we had at the committee, are we managing budget stability or managing financial stability? And for financial stability, we have to look over a 2-year period, right? If I'm just focusing on my budget, it may not be optimal from overall financial managing finances. And the reason for that is prices that are coming down right now means next year's PCIA will be over because PG&E, the way the PCIA is, there's a balancing account that chews up with the rate that they used to forecast PCIA with the actuals that are coming in now. And because the actuals are coming in lower, that means they're not collecting as much to pay for the PCIA as they think they should. So that means next year's rates, part of what's going to drive up next year's rate is not only the prices projections for the projections are lower, but also this balance that's accumulated in from so that's why 2026, even though it's coming at a good year, it's at the expense of 2027 becoming more negative. It's a good question.
Gotcha. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Most of my questions were asked. And then, I am also concerned about PCIA, which is almost 40% of our revenue. But anyway, I don't have any other questions. And then with that, you have question? Go ahead.
One of the things that I'm very concerned about is our ability to do a prepay and what our credit rating is. And that's something that we have to protect because I think there's money there. And with that, when several of us have always been wondering, how do we compare against other CCAs? And what one of the big differences is that I've learned over the past little while is it's in our customer mix. So it would be good to see on the revenue side and I think in our financial statements coming up, I think we should look to do some segment reporting on commercial versus residential so that our credit rating agency can understand that difference. And you may have separate conversations with them, but I think the audited financial statements should have that. So I'd like to see in the future having an understanding of our commercial and residential customers.
Meaning separate the revenues out?
Yeah, we can deal with it offline, but basically, I think a lot of the board members see this as a residential, customers, but the difference with SVCE is we have a large amount of commercial customers.
Maybe I'll just add to that, that in the financial lever playbook that the board approved in June,
June.
one of the things that we were directed to look at, not for this stub year or not for fiscal year 27, but we will start it in fiscal year 27, is the value proposition and establishing tiered or different rate schedule than that we have right now, different clean tiers. Should we have to enact the playbook for FY 28? And that would involve looking at what do our residential versus non-residential or large commercial customers, what do they need in order to be consider us competitive and continue with this? So that's very much what we intend to do next year. And so we'll be bringing that to the board next year as well, and obviously to the finance committee as well. So you'll see it in that space.
I guess sitting here as a finance committee member, I would encourage you to put that on your radar and start thinking about it, because I think we're to give you direction, and the board looks to us as, quote, the finance experts, or, and I see that as becoming more urgent than less urgent. Sharing your concerns, both Terry and Chuck, on where we're going. So,
Yeah.
But it's always good to have runway in front of you so there's no surprises.
Yeah, it's definitely a financial impact, and so it'll come to this, but it also talks to about how clean we are. And so it talks to the meeting the broader policy direction that the board has set. So in that regard, it'll also go to the executive committee because they help establish policies as well, or recommend the board establish policies. So we'll have a thorough discussion of it should we have to enact it for sure.
Okay, no, any other question before I open for public comment? I open for public comment. Is there any members of the public want to speak on this item, which is recommend the stub operating budget? Do we have anybody in person or remote want to speak on this item?
No public comment, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Then I bring it back to the committee for final comments and any motion. We had the motion in front of us.
A lot of motion related to the speakers and microphones.
Let's just parse through this, and I'll just think out loud. So we're withdrawing the 27.2. We're keeping our discount. We're continuing with the $12 bill credit. The Green Prime premium is staying the same, and we're moving the 3.5 to the Eco Invest Fund. So as I'm reading through this, I can support this, and I would like to make a motion as set forth on slide 14.
Okay.
And I'll second that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Do you want to speak on the motion, or we can, otherwise we'll go for voice vote?
Call for the vote.
Okay, go for voice vote. Say aye if you approve the
Aye.
motion.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstain? None. That passes unanimously.
Thank you.
And I just want to clarify one thing.
Sure.
Those were the high level budget, all the assumptions in the budget that went in.
Correct.
I mean,
Thank you very
Understand.
much.
Um,
Yeah, go ahead.
When will you have preliminary actuals for September 30th? 2026.
yeah, that will be in the, you'll see it in your treasurer's report. And I believe it'll be September, maybe November, maybe December. I have to go back and see, yeah.
Okay, thank you. With that, we move on to the next item. Recommend Silicon Valley Clean Energy Board approve amendments to energy risk management policy. Is there a staff report? And then staff presentation is 15 minutes, if you could.
I'll try to be faster than that.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. Thank you, Scott.
We'll try to move briskly, and you flag if you'd like to discuss further.
Yes.
So we talked about what an energy risk management policy is earlier. The energy risk policy, we just want to call out for you, has in it in section 1.3 that it will be reviewed and updated as needed at least every 2 calendar years by the board. So coming before you with these changes is not kind of out of common form. We're just bringing to you some recommended revisions on a cadence of review. So the next slide. Okay, so this is the important part. There's 2 substantive changes. If you'll let me get through both of them, we can have some discussion, and then I'll touch on the non-substantive changes. So the first substantive change is around a paragraph that's the red lines are shown down below, and removing an inference that's made in a sentence, but then reaffirming the overall essence of that sentence still. So the inference is the first part that's struck here. It's referring to speculative buying and selling is prohibited. And then it says including, and it mentions financial derivatives and sorts of financial derivatives. We want to just separate that language into 2 distinct things, since inherently a financial derivative or a transaction type is not necessarily speculative or non-speculative. You know, our staff today is not allowed to speculate even with the products that the board has approved for their use. So, and they could, in theory, you know, someone could speculate with a physical product, for example, as opposed to a financial derivative. So really, we're just trying to clean up that language to take away inference there and just say, in this paragraph here, hey, speculation is prohibited. Separately, derivatives, and this is the sentence at the bottom, the use of financial derivatives, including the things mentioned, is prohibited as well. And then there's a call out here just for clarity, so that there's not a lack of understanding. Technically, when we settle the products that we'd use for physical settlement in CAISO, CAISO would call those financial products, meaning the ISTs and the CRRs in their vernacular are financial, but technically they also settle like a physical product in CAISO and offset physical obligation. So we're just mentioning that there for the avoidance of doubt. The other thing in that purple sentence at the end of the paragraph, we're seeking to clarify also that if there's ever a compliance obligation that has to be met for a regulatory authority, it's not speculative if that obligation were to cause us to need to buy in excess of a load. It's not necessarily foreseeable that that's a common instance, but it's possible, and we just want to call that out there because speculation is really defined here as buying more than you need in the sense. So that's the first substantive change. So put a pin in that if you have questions for one moment. And let me jump to the second one. This one is around the hedge threshold tolerances under which staff seeks to manage the portfolio over a 5-year horizon. We're just seeking to raise the maximum tolerance to 110% all the time. Now, if I don't think none of you are contribute on the ROC committee, but the ROC would understand this right away because we've spent many months showing a violation of policy that we all openly understand is a consequence of 2 things. One is our PPAs in future years have leveled up. So without getting into knowing exactly the numbers, let's say that there's 60% of the portfolio in the foreseeable future hedged through purchase power agreements, which we enter into because of compliance obligation, and it comes with effectively a hedge. And then also we last year in these revisions to policy recognized the PCIA as a sort of financial hedge to the portfolio, and that contributes towards satisfying these tolerances. Well, if you take 60% from the PPAs and you stack on it, I'll just use a round number of 30% for a PCA financial hedge, you're already at 90% and the portfolio manager hasn't even done anything around that yet. And it's in excess of that 80% threshold at the top end in years 3, 4, and 5. So we are effectively asking to revise policy to really kind of acknowledge a reality of our business, which is 2 regulatory items start us off at 90% to begin with, in essence. And again, here in this purple language, we're just saying, hey, if we have to exceed any of these to meet a compliance obligation, it doesn't mean we're going to rush out to sell something else. It would, if there's an exception, it would be discussed and communicated with a duty to notify the ROC and have a conversation. So those are the 2 substantive changes. And with that, I'll field any questions before we jump to the non-substantive ones.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. So I have one question about the first one. So if you might switch back to that. So I think I get the part, the second part is not selling energy or environmental attributes that are not yet owned by SVC. So we're not going to be like Microsoft was when they started selling DOS to IBM or licensing it without even owning it yet. So we're not going to do that. That's really cool. There was a state law, I think, that passed last year or the year before that allows CCAs to buy energy from other CCAs. Now, I guess the difference is that we can't plan to do that. So we can't purchase extra in advance of our forecasted load requirements, thinking that we might have it available to sell to somebody else. Is that kind of, am I off base on that?
Not necessarily, but we also would say that we shouldn't sell it to just the market. Just like we do a solicitation to procure power, we could do a solicitation to sell power.
Okay. Okay.
That's both.
All right. So, and that law kind of, that applies to just if you happen to have some extra and there's a CCA that needs it, we could sell it to them, Monica?
I don't know. I don't think I know of the bill that you talk about, but there was a proposed legislation for this year that would allow the CCAs to
buy from
trade
each other. And I thought that
trade
passed.
their
Yeah.
resource adequacy obligations.
Oh,
And
okay.
that did not pass.
It didn't
That-
pass.
It died in the suspense hearing.
It got okay.
Yes,
Thank
it's
you.
not good, but we've always been able to transact with each other
With
through.
okay.
Yeah, there's nothing prohibited.
So it was, I thank you.
You're
Thanks for that.
welcome.
Any other questions on the first one?
Go ahead,
No, the second one.
All right, let's jump to the second.
second one.
So this makes sense to me, and maybe you can tie it in, but I think that we are looking at our content label for transmission losses, right, which are 6%, is that right? So on your maximum tolerance, I mean, we're at 106% and so to me, it makes sense to have it greater than the 90 and the 80.
So what you say is true. Let me just clarify though, that this being higher at 110% is because power typically, if we're doing, I'll say, closeout transactions for the portfolio, we typically will buy what we call block power, meaning it's the same volume all the time, but our customers use power differently hourly. And so volumetrically, you might overbuy a little bit to hedge your risk optimally. And that's why in these policies like this, typically the threshold is above 100%. You are correct on the 106%, but we usually bake the losses into the denominator overall. So that would already be taken into account.
Thank you for explaining that to me.
Sure.
Yeah, so my understanding is this is, as you, I think, alluded, already we are at 90% with PCIA and then the generation rate and other things. Is that correct, Scott?
Yeah, PPAs, purchase power agreements,
Purchase power agreement.
mandate to have long-term agreements. And then we also have to handle the PCIA or the implications of the PCIA. And as we made the judgment last year, we have a sensitivity to market from those. And so we account for those as part of our hedge.
Okay. Thank you. Any other question on, okay, go ahead with,
I will try to be brisk. I don't want to gloss over anything because I don't want it to be that we rushed you through this. So just to hit on this list, the appendix to this document has detail on every one of these, but they're what I would consider non-substantive changes. I'll just hit on what they are. And if you have questions or you do want to look at detail, happy to take you to it. So the first change was literally just the addition of the word solicitation in the opening of the document as recommended by counsel Mike, and to address that we do solicitation as part of risk management policy and practice. Load risk is a descriptive paragraph that expounds on what otherwise is weather-related load risk to include the risk of losing a big customer, competitive economic reasons versus getting a big customer, say a data center coming into the area or something like that. Those are kind of binary things that could happen and they're volumetric and they present risk for the portfolio. The product list in here, there was some redundancy to some of the elements. And so we just made it more succinct and non-duplicative in reference to versions of products and clean that up a little bit. We explained what CRRs are, congestion revenue rights. So that was added an explanatory paragraph about congestion revenue rights and how they work and what they are. The delegation of authority allows for use of CRRs, but then we clarified here that there are two ways to get CRRs. One is auction and one is allocation. And allocations we get for free because we are a load serving entity. So we receive those. They're not really something we're transacting per se. So we clarified that the delegation of authority relates to CRR auctions, where we would proactively be bidding a price at which we would accept CRRs. So that's to separate those two forms of receiving them. We adjusted one footnote from last year's edits that caused some confusion with staff. I think I got a question 2 or 3 times during the year about it. So I just took the liberty of rewording it to make it more clear for them. Just a footnote about delegated authority. And then the last point was a recommendation by council also, which was to just change the terminology direct holdings to financial interests to properly align with legal terminology. And that is related to our conflict of interest section. So said a lot there quickly. Don't want to just brush through it for the sake of time though. Touching on quickly. Do you have any questions?
any comments from committee members? Thank you, Scott.
Very good.
Yeah, I'll open for public comments. Anybody wishing to speak on this item, the recommended amendments to energy risk management policy? Do we have anybody?
No comments, Chair.
Okay. With that, we bring it back to the committee. Any final thoughts before we make the motion? Okay, can we have a motion, please?
Elle, can you put the motion up there, please? We recommend, so I'll make a motion to approve the proposed amendments to the energy risk management policy.
Second.
Thank you. Any final comment before we go to voice vote? If not, voice vote, say aye. If you approve the motion, aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstain? No, that motion carries unanimously.
Okay, thank you very much. We are
Chairman Raleigh and CFO Amrit Singh had made a suggestion to me offline, and I think it's a really good suggestion. I know that we covered some really complicated risk management concepts here today, and you all don't have the benefit of maybe having been given some fundamental understanding of some of our risk management risks and what we try to manage in concepts. And so I'm going to suggest we have a training module that we've created for staff and for members of our advisory committee, to me, the Risk Oversight Committee, that we're going to offer to provide that same training to you all if you're interested in it. This is something that Scott and his team has put together, and it's been refined over the years, and it's quite good, just some basics. So if you're interested, we're more than happy to then provide that to you.
Thank you very much. I would be interested.
That'd be
Yes,
great.
I would be as well.
Thank you.
Great,
Yeah.
then we'll schedule that with you all. I mean, we can
Okay.
bring it to a committee meeting, or maybe we do it offline.
Thank you very much. Next is committee members' remarks. Do we have any remarks from the committee members? If not, any staff remarks? Okay, with that, we'll adjourn the meeting at 12:04. Not bad. Thank you.
You.
Oh, thanks, Scott.